where the idea is that you'll be doing it every 6 months. But once again, it's every 6 months is approximately 180 days, not exactly depending. But you have some extra space. So if you want to do an early renewal or something, that is available to you as a possibility. So that is coming in addition to the maximum term. The maximum DCV, domain control validation reuse period, will also go down to 200 days. So domain control validation will occur twice as often. Probably that won't be a big deal for most of us. Um, uh, but it will come, and it will be something that affects us also. So this means that for most of us, practically speaking, we are probably going to be doing all the functions that we do around certificate renewal twice as often as we are today. Now, twice as often, you know, can be a significant increase in our workload, right? It's doubling the workload associated with this. Twice as often also is doubling the risk. So if something goes wrong, if you miss a renewal, if a certificate is installed incorrectly, the chance of you having an outage or a problem or some kind of really bad day is twice what it would have been previously. Now, just to finish this up, the rest of these steps are that's on March 15, 2026, that comes into play. So that's 200 days from today. Exactly 1 year later, March 15, 2027, that drops down to 100 days. Same thing, 100 days is 3 months plus a little bit, right? So again, we have some wiggle room. We can renew early. We can do stuff like that. But at that point, imagine you're on a 3 month renewal cadence where every 3 months you're doing it. That's now 4 times the work you're doing now. That's twice the work you're going to be doing starting March 16. And then 2 years after that, on March 15, 2029, it drops down to 47 days. 47 days, of course, is 1 month plus a little bit. So the vision there is that you're on a monthly renewal cadence. So let's say you're doing, the 5th of every month or the second Tuesday of every month or however you work that out. And you're having a monthly renewal cadence where once a month these are going in. And then again, you've got your wiggle room if you need to do an early renewal, or if the automation fails, you can go in and manually fix it or things along those lines. And that's what the wiggle room is for. So the first of these is coming up. It's the 200-day milestone, not the most extreme of these, but I would say already pretty extreme. If you're looking at doubling your work, and if you're looking at doubling your risk, this is already a big deal. And it definitely needs our focused attention. Um, so we'll get back to what we want to do about this, but let's just talk about why this is going on. Because this comes up a lot. People say, why is this happening? Right. And the answer isn't because browsers really want us to be unhappy, right? The answer is that shorter certificates, are just plain safer, and they're better for the web PKI ecosystem, the online ecosystem as a whole, in several ways. So first of all, the safer point. Safer point, which is this first bullet here, enhanced security. A shorter cert is just reducing the risk surface, the risk window, if you will, for a problem. So let's just say hypothetically that your private key is compromised. Let's say your private key is compromised when you are 150 days into your certificate term. Well, that private key in a 398 day, in our current scenario, is usable for more than 6 months. That private key in the new scenario, starting on in March of 2026, will be usable for at most 50 days, right? And that's, even if you take the most extreme scenario, let's say you get the private key gets compromised on day one. Under those circumstances, you have halved the amount of time that a bad guy can do something with it. And same is true of other things: misissued certs, misinstalled certs, misused certs, um, certs that are abused by somebody who has permissions they shouldn't have. All of these scenarios the risk window is just significantly reduced. And it gets even more significantly reduced as we go down further and further and further, right? The other thing to appreciate is that this is a step down plan, right? Goes down to 200 days, then 100 days, then 47 days. 47 days is the goal. And the step down plan helps all of us adjust and get there and figure out how to live in the new world rather than having a single catastrophic apocalyptic day where suddenly we go from 1 year certs to 1 month certs and stuff breaks everywhere, right? The idea is that the step down plan will give us all a chance to adjust and learn what we need to do and iron out the bugs so there's not going to be this day that goes down in history as the day the internet broke, right? So that's the idea behind the step down. The other benefit of the step down, though, is we do start getting these other benefits, granted in a milder way, but we do start getting on some of these other benefits with every step, right? So the first one is just enhanced security. They are safer. They just are. Um, the second one is essentially crypto agility. Limiting outdated cryptographic standards is kind of a long-winded way of saying crypto agility. And the best example of this, the one that really sticks in my mind, is the deprecation of SHA-1. So SHA-1 as a hashing algorithm had been instituted long, long ago, and at the time it was deemed to be fine. And then new attack methods and the increasing available computing power between the two of them got to the point where SHA-1 was not considered to be a safe hashing algorithm. It was unhashable, dehashable. And so the kind of the crypto community came to this conclusion to the point where the browsers felt that action needed to be required. And so SHA-1 got um, deprecated as a usable hashing algorithm. And so they set a date and they said, as of this date, you can't issue any more certs with SHA-1. And they made it in the future so that CAs and subscribers had time to retool their stuff to be able to do it and all the stuff that we always do. And so that date rolled around. And at that point, we were in the period of time where the maximum term for a TLS cert was 3 years. And so there was a date, I forget what it was, but let's call it day zero, where a hashing algorithm wasn't allowed anymore. And more than 3 years later, because remember, it was 3 years plus some extra months, right? So more than 3 years later, there were still certificates in the wild being used in production systems that had this hashing algorithm that approximately 4 years previously had been determined to be unsafe. And that was the real wake up call for the browsers, where they said, you know what, this just isn't okay. We don't live in a world where we can determine something's unsafe and then sit around for 4 years, right? If there was anything else in your life, if there was a problem with the elevator in your building or if your car had bad brakes, you wouldn't say, oh, I'll deal with it in 4 years. It'll be fine, right? You would say, my car has bad brakes. People could die. I need to deal with this. And so that led to this real clarity in the minds of the browsers and other people that we need an ecosystem that is more crypto agile, that we can change our cryptography more quickly. And one of the big culprits, not the only culprit, but one of the big culprits in slow crypto agility is, in fact, long certificate term. So the more we shorten certificate term, the more crypto agility we introduce, because the shorter the time comes between when a change is made and when that change has propagated through the entire world, the entire ecosystem. And right now, we still have a lag time of more than a year. Starting in March, that's going to go down to a lag time of a little over 6 months. Big improvement. Year after that, that will go down to a lag time of a little over 3 months. Even more improvement, right? So that's another big one. And then the there is a widespread belief, and this is certainly held by the major browsers and a lot of other people in the community, that automation is fundamentally better, more secure, more resilient, better for uptime, better for business continuity than manual processes. Humans installing certificates are is fraught with danger, fraught with error. And all the time we see headlines. Many times a year, we will see headlines about major technology providers, born in the cloud tech providers, people like Microsoft and Nintendo and um, uh, 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 just huge technology product providers who should be good at this, who have outages that ultimately owe themselves to certificate, either failed renewal or wrong installation, wrong configuration. And those are just the ones we know about. We experience these outages all the time. Most of the time, we don't know what's going on. I am quite confident that many of those are also certificate outages, and they just don't get revealed to the public that way. And so, one of the things that the browsers have come to as a conclusion, and I think they're right, is that enterprises do not prioritize automation of this function unless there's a good reason to do so. And I talk personally to a lot of people who are in certificate administration roles in their organizations who really want to do automation. And the problem is that they are fighting for roadmap and they're fighting for budget, and they get trumped by other stuff. And so they put in their requests, and I want to buy these tools and I want to implement these things. And then they basically, someone says, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else instead. Your need isn't great enough. And so as certificate lifespans shorten, this is the opportunity for all of us who are down in the trenches, who are living this, to get those automations in place. And we get that operational efficiency and we get that reduced risk from having an automated system do this rather than error prone humans doing this. So, operational efficiency is widely understood as a big benefit of this change that I really believe is going to happen, broadly. And agility and flexibility, this is a lot like crypto agility, but it's more general than that. Um, as we get to shorter certificates, the in general, any change we want to make is going to occur much more quickly, right? And it's going to be better. And as we put automation in place, any change we make is going to want to occur more quickly. So there are a couple great examples of that coming up. One of this is the deprecation of MTLS, of client certificate with TLS certificates. So right now, you can get a certificate that will be your server certificate, and it will also do client authentication for server to server communication. And that is a practice that is going away. That is something that is going to be disallowed by policy starting in June 15th of next year. And so we all are going to have to adjust. We're going to have to get rid of our certs that do MTLS and replace them with designated server certs and designated client certs. And the more agile we are with our automation and our slower certificate, our faster certificate lifespans, our shorter, I should say, certificate lifespans, the more easily that will occur. Another great example of this is that we're going to have to be changing out our cryptographic algorithms. We're going to have to be moving away from RSA and ECC, and we're going to have to move to post-quantum cryptographic algorithms like MLDSA. And as we do that, once again, it's going to require that our certificates change because the certificates will enable or whatever signing algorithm is in there. And so we need to, those things will need to cycle out. And if your certificates are shorter, they're going to cycle out more quickly. So that kind of agility and that kind of flexibility is also a big benefit to all of this. Um, and ultimately, this leads to a bunch of sort of hygiene practices like automation that are widely believed to be better for your uptime, your business resiliency, and your security. So these are all the benefits that come And they are going to have an impact across the entirety of the web PKI, everybody who's using a public certificate to secure a server. Um, so I probably hit, right. So I guess the question would be, well, why now? And I sort of hit on a lot of this, but some of the factors that are driving this now is really now is the time that we're ready. So the first point is that the phase out has been going on. Originally we were at infinite, whatever you want, and then it went down to 5 years, and then 3 years, and then 2 years, and then 1 year. So this has been a cadence that's been going on for years and years and years, right? And after 1 year, obviously, sub 1 year is the next step. So that's part of it. This has been a general trend. Some of the factors that make this the right time to make this change is that automation options are very mature, right? There has been a worry in the past where people say, well, look, if you make certificate term too short, are my automation options going to be able to deal with this? And at this point, automation options are very mature. They're very widespread. If you're using a current version of any popular platform, you have automation options, right? Now, if you're using old unsupported versions and stuff, you may have to deal with that. But that kind of stuff probably has to be dealt with sooner or later anyway. And maybe this is the forcing function to get those old things deprecated and replaced with modern updatable current operating systems and servers and hardware and whatnot. Um, the so that's a big one. Other changes like the PQC changes that are coming really are putting pressure on there being much more um agility, right? Much more ability to change quickly. Um, and there's a general the security benefit has always been there. And we've been trying to realize that and take advantage of that as well as we can, as soon as we can. And the fact that we're taking on security risk by having long-lived certs is a fact. And so shortening those certificates will be beneficial for overall security whenever it occurs, right? And for the security of you as a subscriber, and also for the people, the relying parties, right? The people who rely on you. So I already touched the post-quantum cryptography point because I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that is another key part of all of this is post-quantum cryptography. So, you know, um, a little bit of background on this, right? So quantum physics obviously caused us to think about a lot of things in a different way. And one of the ideas that formed in the latter part of last century is that you could build a computer that leveraged quantum physics. Instead of having traditional 1-0 bits like we're used to, it would have a thing you call a quantum bit or a qubit. And a qubit has the advantage that it can be 1 and 0 at the same time. And it will be a certain percent. It'll be 35% 1 and 65% 0. And if that seems funny, then that's quantum physics for you. Quantum physics is funny. And this was a theoretical idea that turned into a realistic engineering project over time. And we've gotten to the point now where quantum computers are real things. They're being operated, they're being made by a number of large companies that are investing in this, people like Google and IBM and uh, uh, Amazon and probably some nation states that we don't know about. And one of the things that's become clear is that one of the obvious applications for a quantum computer, unfortunately, is to defeat RSA and ECC. And that's just an accident of the math behind those two particular encryption algorithms and how a quantum computer can do that math in a very, very different way. And so what we need new encryption algorithms that aren't vulnerable to this hyper fast problem solving that quantum computers in certain cases are capable of. And so we have the first set of algorithms to do this, MLChem, MLDSA. These are used to be called crystals kyber, crystals dilithium, if you've heard those words. These are FIPS standards out of NIST now. And these are going to be the things that we're all using out of the gate. That's coming. NIST has called for deprecation of RSA and ECC by 2030, which happens to be pretty close to the 2029 47-day deadline. And that's not entirely coincidental because there is a recognition by the browsers that we need to be able to swap these things out fast. Another important thing to understand is that MLChem and MLDSA are very unlikely to be the final algorithms we're using. We should not expect there to be another era where for 40 or 50 years we use a single cryptographic algorithm. That is not a world we live in. So the fact that, probably everybody on this call spent their entire career, their entire adult career, their entire adult life depending on a single encryption algorithm, which is RSA, that is not something we should expect to happen ever again. Instead, we should expect to move in a world of sort of a continual change of cryptographic updates. And exactly how fast those updates occur is not clear to me, but I doubt sincerely it's less often than every 10 years. And I could imagine it even being faster than that. So imagine every 10 years or every 5 years, we're basically swapping out our cryptography for new algorithms that are safe from the new attacks that are being developed and are emerging. And that's the new world that we're moving into, and we've all got to get ready for it. And so that takes a few forms, one of which is, very updatable software and hardware. Again, this practice of, oh, I'm running stuff that's not supported and it hasn't supported in 10 years, but I think it's okay. That practice is going to become increasingly difficult to have inside of our enterprises. And we all know we all do it. Everybody has that stuff somewhere. But that's going to be increasingly problematic for you. The other thing that's going to be increasingly problematic is not having a great deal of control and agility over your certificates. And certificates are the things that enable and trigger this cryptography. You need to have certificates that are appropriate and are doing the right thing. And so having a full command of our certificates, knowing where they are, knowing what they do, and being able to change them and control them becomes increasingly important. So that ties in as well. And though that's not the main driver for the shortening of certificate lifespans, this was something that has been publicly and explicitly discussed by browsers as a benefit to this kind of thing going back at least as far as 2023. So we know that that's a motivator as well. And we know that's a benefit for all of us as well. Now, so bringing it back home to what happens in March. In March, we are going to suddenly have a maximum term of 6 months as opposed to a maximum term of 1 year. And what does this do? It introduces work and it introduces risk, right? We have the risk of now we have, more chance that a renewal goes unobserved until there's a problem, right? We also have more chance that an error occurs, that something gets installed incorrectly or in the wrong place, or some kind of error occurs that the renewal happens, but the actual installation and execution is somehow wrong. And so whatever risk level we have on that now, that at least doubles. If you don't increase your resources, it probably more than doubles, because if you have resources that are already taxed right now, that are right sized for the amount of certificate management you need to do today, and suddenly all those people are expected to do twice the work, then I think the propensity for error on any given transaction goes up, on any given operation goes up. And if we have twice as many of these operations, and the chance of any given operation failing is higher than it was, then our overall risk of failure is actually something beyond 2x what it is today. How much does that propensity go up? I don't know, right? It's a new world. This hasn't been measured. It would be hard to measure even if we could, but thought experiment wise, if you say, if it goes up even a little bit more, you're looking at something that's beyond 2x in terms of the amount of risk you're going. So that is really big. And then what does that mean? It's the things you expect. Downtime is the big one. Outages are the big one we care about. But sometimes this can lead to security flaws. If the thing that's going down is something that's keeping us secure, then that also could lead to breach, right? And ditto for compliance failures, right? If the thing that's going down is putting us out of compliance, now we also can have compliance failures, SLA failures, penalties, compliance fines. All of those things are the risks that we suffer. And however much risk we're suffering that today, that again has at least doubled, and I'm going to contend more than doubled starting on March 15th. Um, that's that's sort of what we say throughout this slide. I guess the last point that's worth pointing out is that outages in our current modern world, as opposed to let's say 10 years ago or maybe even 5 years ago, there's this new phenomenon, which is kind of there's a cascading spreading failure problem. So we've built our enterprises up to the point where everything is touching everything else, where there's complete interdependency inside of our digital systems, and every digital system is feeding other digital systems. So you tend to see less of these kind of isolated outages, one thing fails, and much more of these sweeping spreading outages, where a failure leads to other failures and other failures and other failures. And I think the example of this that illustrates it best is the O2 outage in 2018. So in 2018, there was a third party provider, which was Ericsson. And Ericsson provided some back end services that the O2 cellular service used. And there was a certificate that went unrenewed. A single certificate went unrenewed inside of one server in one spot inside of this Ericsson service. And what that did is that led to a cascading spreading failure inside the Ericsson service, which ultimately led to a complete failure of the O2 mobile network for nearly a day. It wasn't just O2, it was the SoftBank network in Japan and some other smaller providers around the world. And more than 40 million cell phone users were without the use of their cell phones for nearly a day. And that was due ultimately to this single certificate. So we no longer have the kind of one thing, one server stops working, one function stops working world. We're in the world now where the things that depend on that stop working, and then the things that depend on those things stop working, et cetera, et cetera. And it spreads downstream. And the O2 problem is exactly what we saw. So, part of what also this means is when our risk occurs, when we go back to saying I'm evaluating my risk for certificate problems, the scope, the stakes go up because what actually fails goes up. So that's what we're looking at. So what do we do about it? So at this point, it's probably obvious. I'm of the opinion that what we do about it is automate. And so the rest of this presentation is ideas for how you automate. You got 200 days. So let's start looking at what our automation is. Hopefully, a lot of us are working on this already. If we're not working on this, 200 days is still a decent chunk of time. And we can take measures and we can take steps and we can start getting this into place. And that's what we advise you to do. If you're not working on this, you really want to start working on this now. If you are working on this, good job, and you want to keep the spurs on it. Okay? So if we look at what we have here, right? Policy tooling and process updates. These are things we can be doing right now. Let's look at our certificate request and approval workflows. Are they standard? Are they documented? Does everyone know how to use them? Are they built into the tools and the processes that we use? Right? If it's someone sends an email to someone and someone does something with a spreadsheet, that is a weak and fragile process. That is something that's going to get harder and harder. It's going to be more likely to have errors and failures as we start doing twice as much work. That would be something we should look to modernize and make standardized and computerize and get it into a ticketing system or however we're going to do that. Right? What are the repeatable steps? We say here create templates. What is the, run book for how we do a renewal, and to what degrees can we templatize or standardize that so it always occurs the right way every time, so it doesn't involve individual judgment, so it doesn't involve individual humans having to remember a set of instructions, but rather this can be built into a process or a workflow where it is reliable and predictable and we know it's going to be right. What are our escalation procedures? What happens when something goes wrong? Are these understood? Are these defined? Are these efficient? Can I use these correctly? Do these escalation procedures reliably solve my problem? And then what do we learn, right? We're going to take a first crack at all of these things. And one of the things we all know in life is that our first cracks are, even if they're a good start, ideas get uncovered. Things come up that we didn't foresee, or they don't work exactly the way we expected, or there are other circumstances, and then we adjust, right? We make it better, we improve, we continually improve. So, what's your continual improvement process? How are you going to learn from what you're doing? How are you going to find the faults and fix them? Find the opportunities to make it more efficient or more effective or more reliable and implement those. And these are things to be thinking about because March 15 is coming, right? Like we can't stop it. This is going to happen. And if you think about this now, you can be working on changes and systems that make this better. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Just have to clear my throat. If you're not thinking about this now, then you're going to be thinking about it when it's causing problems. And the more we can get ahead of this, the better off we're all going to be, right? So again, these other two columns, I really like this. So I want to kind of dwell on the side a little. Let's go down the bullets and the policies that protect, right? Define ownership and accountability. One of the things we see a lot in enterprises is that um, uh, all kinds of people in all parts of the organization just unilaterally do whatever they want with certificates. And it's a wild and woolly mess. And you've got people with enough technical know-how to get a cert and install it who don't view it as necessarily their responsibility to monitor that thing in the long term. They don't think about renewal. They don't tell other people who might think about renewal. And this comes up all the time. This is one of the reasons why people who administrate certificates find it such a nightmare is that any yahoo anywhere in the company can go get one. Um, and they don't even necessarily know, right? So defining ownership and accountability is hugely valuable. And I think this is going to get easier as certificate lifespans get shorter because the time gap between someone installs something and something breaks goes down. And as that goes down, there will be more cognizance and more aware of it. And imagine when I'm in a day where certificate renewal is monthly and I know that, it's much harder for me to do something and just walk away. So that hopefully will help drive a certain accountability, ownership, and understanding of process. Set clear renewal and revocation policies. This is directly tied into the same thing, right? Figure out what we're doing, document it, make sure it works, make sure people know. Align internal policies with browsers and CA requirements, right? So this is just saying make sure that those policies we define are going to really work in the real world as certificate lifespans continue to decrease. And then I like this last one, right? What's my threshold for an alert? If I've got 200-day certs, I probably don't want to be renewing these every 199 days. I probably do want to get on a nice 6-month cadence so they're predictable and understandable, and it gives me a little bit of wiggle room. So, what am I going to do? How am I procedurally going to make sure that that really happens? At what point do I start to be saying, hey, this certificate needs to be reviewed? So, that's something that's worth thinking about. So, what are your quick wins today? Moving to the other column, right? Consolidate your certificate inventory. This is a big one. Understand what you have, right? Let's try to understand what we have as well as we can before we find out the hard way because something breaks, because something didn't get renewed, right? That's what we want to get away from as much as we possibly can. Automation, automation, automation. Automated renewal, also automated installation. So it's one thing to have say something's going to automatically identify that a cert is up for renewal, it's going to get a new cert and is going to deliver it to you. That's great. Let's do that. It's even better if it can take it all the way to the endpoint and install it for you. That last mile automation, which is available in lots and lots of environments, is incredibly helpful. And if you're not looking at that, you really want to be. Remove unused or expired certs, test alerting and monitoring systems. I think those things probably are pretty self evident. But these are some things we can be doing now that will help us down the road. So, what does this look like as an action plan? Assuming that you're not already partway through this process, again, it's not too late, but let's get going. So here's what we're going. I mean, we honestly we wished you would have gotten going earlier, and we were out there saying that's earlier. But if you didn't get going, let's get going now. We can still do this, right? So in the next 30 days, let's start discovery. Let's figure out certificates what we have. Let's do our best of having a real list of the certificates we're using, the server certificates, the TLS certificates that we're using. And let's look for opportunities to get automation in the next 200 days. And this is an important thing to think about. You don't have to have perfection. What you have to have is a good start. This is where 80-20 rules are our friend. Later on, a few years from now, we're going to be going for perfection or awfully close. At this point, what we're going for is 80-20. If I can put some automation in place that suddenly will take 3/4 of my certs out of my workflow, then that extra quarter I can deal with within my existing resources. And I don't have this crisis of risk that we talked about before, or this crisis of workload. If I can even automate half of them, then I'm made whole because the other half gets doubled and I come out the same, right? So this is what to look for. What are the automation opportunities that I can get in place in the next 200 days that are going to yield big benefits for me? And those are the ones that I focus on and knock out those big swaths of work, right? And then you're still going to have some work. But if you can knock out big fields of work, then you have enough workflow to get these things done. So that's what you do within 30 days. Within 90 days, we need to have a real action plan, right? We need to know real specifically, this is what we're doing. This is what we're buying if we need to buy something. This is what we're building if we need to build something. Here's where we're installing it. Who's doing it? How are we QAing it? What are the timelines and when do we expect to be done? Right? That's got to be done in the next 90 days. Then we implement. Then we actually put these things, we roll the automation in, we test it, we be confident that it's working correctly. And we want to have these things up and running by March 15th. So that's what we suggest for our action plan. All right. And I just touched on this, but this is important, right? This is where we're doing the 80-20s, right? We're working on risk reduction. We're not going for perfection. Right now, we're going for big wins that knock out a whole lot of manual work. With a future action plan to eventually have damn near 100% coverage. But that doesn't have to be in the next 200 days. In the next 200 days, we need to knock out a whole bunch of manual work. Automate those high impact systems. Focus on where outages would hurt the most. Focus on where you spend the most manual labor, where you have the largest number of certs, right? It all doesn't have to be done all at the exact same time. You can do this in bits and pieces. That's fine too. And we do believe that almost everybody in the world is going to have some manual processes that are still going on after March 15. That's okay. Again, what we want to do is we want to get rid of enough of it that doubling the cadence on our remaining manual processes will be workable for us. Now, after March 15, it doesn't stop because in another year, it doubles again. So we have to continue to go back and keep knocking out more and more chunks of our manual work. But in the next 20 days, if you can knock out some big chunks, that's what to focus on, and that's going to be a big deal. As we see at the bottom, the goal is reduce human error, increase predictability, and build confidence. And I think that's exactly right. This is kind of the same thing in a different chart, right? Where is what we suggested as of August. Figure out your inventory, move through these steps. Basically the same thing I described on the previous side. So, a And an automated tool can help you with that. So you really want to think about getting some kind of certificate lifecycle management tool in place. And there's a bunch of things that a CLM can do for you, like certificate discovery is a big one. You can go out ahead of time, you can do a crawl, you can find the certificates and know what you have, get them into a system where you can see them, where you can categorize them, where you can attach alerts to them and do reporting and things along those lines. You can create policy templates. You can create actual revocation workflows or alerting workflows or renewal workflows. And all of this stuff becomes very helpful. This certs owned by nobody problem that every enterprise runs into, where we find out the hard way when that cert starts working because nobody thought it was theirs to manage. These sorts of things are solvable with a CLM product. And it's one of the things that we highly recommend that you consider. If you're not doing that, you really are going to have to be as certificate lifespans continue to go down. Um, and again, I talk to a lot of people who are certificate administrators who they know they need it, but selling it internally is the challenge. So here's some of the things to think about when you're trying to sell it internally. So there is a workload benefit just for starters. There's an efficiency of your human resources benefit. So people cost a lot of money. People are flexible and versatile and can do other good tasks for you. And if they're stuck administrating certificates, installing certificates all day, they don't necessarily have the time to be doing those other tasks, right? There's an IT skills gap throughout industry and has been for decades and probably will continue to be for more decades, which is we can't hire as many good people with IT skills that we want. We just can't. And this is something that happens all over. And so, to the degree that I can repurpose people that I already have by taking work off their plates, that's a very smart play. So, human efficiency is a big way to make your case for automation. Another one, of course, we talked a lot about the risk of outage, right? Outages are insanely expensive. You got lost business, you got bad customer satisfaction, you got inefficient people inside your own company because they're dealing with this. You've got reputation and brand damage. You've got SLA penalties and regulatory penalties, and all of these things come over time. There are real, very hard costs to outages that are very significant. And a little bit of investment in certificate automation can reduce that risk significantly. Staff productivity, I think we talked. Also, getting the best out of your staff, career pathing people and building their skill sets, and all of that becomes easier if they're not busy doing repetitive certificate management work all day, every day. Compliance is a big one. You can get a sense for what your certificates are. You can see them. You can do reports and dashboards and know what rules I'm supposed to follow and be confident that I really am. And you can be confident that you're compliant, and you also can be confident that you can demonstrate your compliance. So all of that comes. And then, of course, security, right? One of the things that we've already talked about is sometimes when our systems go down, the thing that goes down is the thing that's protecting us. And under those circumstances, we have security lapses. So certificate failures can be the root cause of breaches. And this is one of the things that happens. And to the degree that we minimize security failures, we also are reducing our risk, or to the degree that we minimize certificate failures, we also are reducing the risk of security problems. So these are all ideas to take away. And as you're trying to discuss this internally, these are all benefits that we're getting from automation of certificates. Now, what are your options? So Acme is a big one, right? Acme automated certificate management environment is a very common protocol with widespread support across lots and lots and lots of server operating systems and hardware, right? The place where you install the cert, there's a very good chance that it supports Acme. Acme is well proven, it runs well. and it's just widely used. So seriously consider using Acme as an option. There are other APIs, sort of common APIs like SCEP and EST as well, which may work for your specific circumstance. And then also just think about good old fashioned writing to an API. In addition to that, like in SCM, we also have things like agents. So we have agents for the most common operating systems. So you can actually install that on the servers. And then it talks directly to the CLM and it takes the certificate and installs it for you. So these are all options for getting your certificate installed. That last mile certificate installation, that's so valuable. And these are things that are worth looking into. Look into Acme, look into API integration, look into using an agent. These are all really good services that are available. Um, so I'm right on time, which is good. Normally I'd be late, so that was pretty neat on my part. If this kind of thing is interesting to you, I want to take a second to plug. I and one of my compatriots here, our technical fellow Jason Sirocco, have a podcast that's focused on digital certificates, PKI, encryption, and stuff like that. Root causes. That's a pun. And you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. So we'd really love to have you join us. We have new episodes every week. We've published more than 500 episodes, and we deep dive into topics like this and a bunch of other things. So do dial into root causes if you're interested in this kind of subject matter. We do have an asset that you might like, our 47-day survival guide, which you can find on Sectigo's website. And I think probably we'll send it to you or have a link in the chat or something, Leah. There's some way we give them that link, right?
Yes, we'll also include that in the follow-up email. And that was also one of the first questions is, can we share the
Okay,
recording? Yes, we will. We'll include that guide as well. So
excellent.
you'll get that tomorrow.
Mhm.
I guess, are we ready for questions, Tim?
Yeah, we're ready for questions.
All right. First one was, are compromised private keys in PKI currently a problem?
Oh, sure. If your private key is compromised, that's it. Like you should consider that you are completely and utterly owned. Like that's it. That is no pun the keys to the kingdom. At that point, they can they just they own you. So compromised private keys are very, very, very bad. To the point where by regulation, uh, every CA must revoke any cert that depends on any compromised private key that it knows about. And it must furthermore block that private key forever. And it must furthermore block every cert that uses that private key, not just maybe the one that it got discovered. So, reuse of private keys, bad practice. Don't do it. If you are doing it and one of them gets compromised somewhere, we have to kill all of those and we can't ever reuse that private key. Sectigo, for instance, we have an instant revocation mechanism built in. So the instant we know about a private key, our software in real time searches for any certs that use it and revokes them. Because that is the ultimate. Without that, like you might as well not have certificates. At that point, you're done. So yeah, does this occur in the real world? Yeah, it does. Right. If your private keys aren't stored securely enough, so we also recommend that you put them in some kind of hardware storage. You put them in a TPM or something like that, where they're much harder to get. If your private keys are just stored as files locally on some server or desktop somewhere, and a bad guy does get in and finds them, that's it. They can do all kinds of stuff. So we do recommend that practice. Compromised keys are a regular occurrence. We get them on a regular basis, and it's just one of the things that happens in the world.
Thanks, Tim. Then we had a lot of questions around what automation tools we recommend, some for very specific use cases where I think we'll get back to you one-on-one. But Tim,
Yeah.
can we maybe speak on automation tools again? Is there any documentation available?
Yeah, there's well, I first of all, the survival guide will go over the basics. So go get that, right? The survival guide will give you at a high end. I think at a real high level, there's three categories of things we want to think about. We want to think about, first of all, if we use an ITSM platform, like let's say ServiceNow, then we can do at least a certain amount of that automation depending on the platform right there. So if that's your method, right? If you're an ITSM shop, then you want to look at your platform and you want to get a sense for what your automation options are right in there. Oftentimes there's plugins and modules, and you may need to get one of those. Oftentimes those will have backend integration. So for an example, we can use our SCM platform in the backend and we'll integrate to a popular package like ServiceNow and allow you to actually push the buttons and do the controls in ServiceNow, and then we do the work in our CLMs. So first of all, if that's the kind of thing you're using, if you're using, that kind of platform, you really need to research what your options are there. Second of all, you really need to think about getting a certificate lifecycle management or CLM platform. And there are a number of them available. Um, and you want to look for a platform that will give you a broad set of capabilities. You definitely want certificate discovery. That's a big one. You definitely want reporting and dashboarding and alerting. That's a big one. And you definitely want last mile installation. That's a big one. So you want a CLM that will integrate with other tools that will ultimately push your certs down and get them installed in those endpoints, because that's where you knock out a whole lot of the risk and a whole lot of the work. And the last one is what we're looking at here on this slide, which is, well, how do I get to the endpoints, right? And just to reiterate, your three big options. Number one, which is a standardized API. Number two is just write to the CLM's API and write to the API in your servers and write some software, some scripts that can connect a bunch of those servers up to your CLM. And then the third way to do it is to get an agent, get a CLM that has agents that you can install on your servers. And then those agents talk directly to the CLM. These are all great options. They're very reliable. They work very well. They give you the functionality you want. Depending on your specific situation, you might prefer one to another. There is time to do this between now and September 15, or and not September 15, that would be pretty soon, but between now and March 15, or even if it wasn't done on day one on March 15, let's say you got it done in April or May, you still start getting those benefits quickly, right? That's the kind of thing to look at. That's the kind of thing to be thinking about.
Thank you, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Does 47 days impact certificates used for identities like client certificates or multi-factor authentication?
So multi-factor authentication, by which I think we mean the same thing, client, right? Um, that is specifically a TLS server certificate reduction. So the important change for client certificates, which I touched on briefly at the top of this presentation, is that you're not going to be able to use the same certificate to do both anymore. And that's coming next year. So next year, you're going to have a separate certificate. That said, these certificates will have separate um, maximum term. The different certificate types have different maximum term. And the maximum term for TLS certs is the one that's stepping down here. Now, there has generally been a trend for all certificates to get shorter in term by regulation. And I do expect that trend to continue across all certificate types. We've seen recent reductions in S-MIME by way of example. There probably are soon reductions coming soon in code signing, and there definitely are reductions in TLS server certs. So yeah, right now think about this focusing on your server certs real specifically.
Thank you. Then a couple of questions that were quite similar around automating DCV. What's the best way to automate that?
Yeah, and I didn't spend a lot of time on DCV on this one just because that wasn't what we wanted to focus on, but that is itself a very important and interesting topic. And one of the things we didn't hit on this slide, but we have hit on other webinars we've done, is that the DCV maximum reuse period will also continue to go down. So in 2026, it becomes 200 days. In 2027, the DCV reuse period drops down to 100 days. And then in 2029, when the maximum certificate term goes down to 47 days, the DCV reuse period goes down to 10 days. So at that point, what we really want to be doing is we want to be thinking about DCV automation options. Um, and that itself is a complex topic. I think we should probably, Leah, let's you and I think about making a future webinar that's focused on that specifically, because that seems like an interesting thing to discuss in more depth. I would say for now, there are some good options. If you contact us directly, one of our enterprise salespeople can talk to you about that. But do think about DNS automation by way of example, as a possible solution, and just to do that for you, so you're not stuck in doing that manually, because that works doubling as well.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And yes, noted on a new webinar topic.
Yeah.
What do companies do with legacy systems that can't be updated or are maybe
Oh,
impossible to replace?
yeah, I hear about this all the time. And it's two main scenarios. Scenario number one is it is unsupported. We have unsupported software, right? Either we just got far enough behind that we can't update to the current version, or we're using something that just plain has been discontinued, right? The company doesn't offer this anymore. The company doesn't exist anymore. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two is we made it ourselves. We developed something and we haven't kept up with the development. We don't have the skills. We don't have the internal resources allocated to it. Perhaps we can't. We might not have the source code, or we might not have the build environment. We literally can't do a build. And these are real things that happen. And kind of the larger and more complex and older your company is, the more likely that that is the case somewhere. And what people have been doing is they've been just getting along. And I liken this in a lot of ways to something like changing the oil in my car. You know what? I don't really want to change the oil in my car. It's expensive, it's difficult. I don't feel like I have time. So I'm just going to keep driving my car with old oil. Well, you can do that for a while, but the problem is you can't do that forever. And somewhere along the line, you're going to have to do something about it. And this one and PQC, which we talked about a bit in this presentation, are going to be forcing functions for these things where we've just been kind of getting away with it. And sorry to say it, but we're going to have to stop getting away with it. Ultimately, you're going to have a reckoning where you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to allocate the budget and the roadmap to getting these systems updated and current, or you're going to be renewing your certificates every 6 months, every 3 months, every month. It's one or the other. And your organization is just going to have to make a choice. Ditto on the PQC stuff. You're going to either update these systems, or you're going to live with RSA knowing perfectly well that a bad guy could own you. And it's one or the other, because this is just the world, right? And you're going to have to make a choice. And so the big thing we say is we wanted people to make eyes open choices. Like, know what you're doing, know what your risk is. And I understand these things are hard, and I understand they're expensive. And you may say, you know what? We're going to suck it up and do this every 3 months for a while. You might make that choice. And I'm not even saying it's a wrong choice. I'm saying that needs to be an eyes open choice. You need to say, I know I'm taking on 4 times the work, 2 times the work and then 4 times the work. I know I'm taking on 2 times the risk and then 4 times the risk, but I'm buying myself 3 years before I have to deal with this, and I'm willing to, right? And that's not wrong, but that's how to think about it. And that needs to be something where all the appropriate stakeholders are involved. And one of the things you can do as certificate administrators is you can socialize internally that this is something we need to do. We all need to understand, we need to know what the risk is, we need to know what's involved, and make we need to make something, we need to make the hard choices.
Thank you, Tim. And we are running out of time a little bit. We have had a couple of extra questions. We'll get back to you directly. Some are very specific as well. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And thanks, Tim. If you
Thank
have
you.
any more questions, do get in touch with the Sectigo team. We regularly run webinars, and you can find them and sign up by our website. We'd love to see you there. But for today, thank you and have a good rest of your day.